Hi Awesome Blossoms, welcome back to my channel. I'm Anna. I know it's been a while, but I have promised myself that I'm not going to start my video off with an apology like I usually do. This year has been hard for everyone, and personally, I have been struggling with motivation to do anything that I like, because that's the mood for 2020, I guess. But I have had a burst of motivation, and I have been reading a lot of poetry as sort of like my way to cope with all of the wild things that have gone down this year. So I guess the good news is I have a lot of content coming your way, and I guess the bad news is that it hasn't reached you yet because I haven't been motivated. But thankfully, the way motivation works is that it always comes back around. I think my motivation has sort of struck me with some new music. That's always really, really exciting to discover new music. And of course, poetry is a great motivation, at least for me. I've read like a ton of poetry that I really, really want to share. And I'm also like really hesitant sometimes because like I know that those videos are going to be super long, but I almost don't care. Like, if they're gonna be long videos, they're just gonna be long videos, and that's just how it's gonna be. But today, motivation comes in the form of a new book. This one is called The Sound of the Earth Singing to Herself by Ricky Ray. This little gem was recommended to me, or actually the publisher, which I will get more into, reached out to me and asked me to read this book, and I was delighted to, of course. It is such a little gem that I kind of feel guilty for not even knowing about the author beforehand, but we're gonna put that to one side. I know about him now, and I'm definitely going to be checking out more of his work. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So a little bit about the poet before we get into the poetry. Ricky Ray is a disabled poet, critic, and essayist, and also founding editor of Rascal, a journal of ecology, literature, and art. So this is not his first book. He has been doing quite a lot of publishing since 2019. I guess that's good news for all of us that once I finish getting you guys invested in this poetry, we'll have lots more to read from him, because the talent, y'all, is just amazing. His awards include a McCormick McCarthy Prize, a Ron McFarlane Poetry Prize, and a Liam Rector Fellowship. So, credentials, shall we say. He definitely knows what he's doing, and it's definitely very apparent in his writing that he is very passionate about the art and truly loves making words come together in interesting ways, for sure. Okay, so as you can see, the book is super short. It is only 23 poems and 34 pages. So technically, I guess if you're one of those people like flies through books, it'll be a quick read, probably one sitting. But for me, personally, a combination of, I suppose, age and college has made me a lot slower of a reader, sadly. But the perks of that is that I sort of take more time and reread things, and I guess the content just seeps into me deeper when I do that. Not all bad. It definitely took me a lot longer to read this than I thought, just because the poetry is like super packed with just a lot of like imagery, which is great, and also like just truth and like life, if that makes sense. And I guess, you know, when you're going through like that whole like motivation struggle or whatever you want to call it, just I guess life in 2020, things hit different. And so I had to take breathers because I was just like, ooh, I felt that. Also, because this book doesn't have like sections, because it's so short, we're just gonna go into like certain themes that Ricky talks about and how he like expresses that. So the first thing that I want to talk about in regards to the poetry is his imagery. Wow, I read a couple of poetry collections this year that really delve into nature. And I have to say, I really, really love how imagery and nature, I guess those two things go really well hand in hand, because it's just all around us and we can't help but use in our poetry. And Ricky really uses nature well. He personifies it. He gives it a different, I guess, meaning or like perspective that I don't really think of a lot. Another thing about Ricky is he really loves animals. He loves his dog, Addie, and she shows up a bunch in his poetry, which is kind of a breath of fresh air, because when I hear, if I ever hear poets talk about animals, sometimes it's not fond, or it's not like a loving memory, or it may just be like a one-time thing that they bring up to sort of bounce off of to get to like their main topic. But Ricky really puts Addie in his poems and like gives her her own, like, I guess, her own area to like run around, even in his words. I really, really liked that. He definitely also like takes notice of animals in a different way than, say, I think a lot of poets that I've read. He really observes them and finds different ticks and little I guess personalities that they have, specifically with Addie. He really, really like brings her into his world because she's a part of his world, and I think that makes sense. So I really liked that about his work. He also speaks on disability, which is, you know, a pretty common topic in poetry. However, I think poets tend to talk more about, or at least the poets that I've read so far, I'm not gonna like blanket statement that, but the poets that I've read so far tend to talk more about mental health, mental disorders, mental disabilities, things like that. While that's great, and I think poetry is like the perfect space to express all of the struggles that go along with that, I haven't read a lot of poets that have talked about physical disabilities. So it was definitely interesting for me to hear perspectives and like experiences that have to deal with more physical disabilities. His, from what I understand with his poetry, revolves more around his legs, and I don't know the story, but what I really took away from all of that is how he is, first of all, like a fighter. He has such a beautiful perspective on even his limitations. He really does have a balance between the physical disabilities and things that go on more in the more mental headspace. For me, any opportunity to talk about mental health or bringing light to the perspectives of people who have physical disabilities, any opportunity to talk about that and to sort of humanize it, because I feel like, especially with mental health and even physical, our society, as much as it is becoming more and more open to learning about things like that, still has this stigma of this incompleteness, which like really upsets me. I think just having that show up more in our reading, in our just media in general, in positive and like healthy ways, is going to help a lot with reducing that stigma, hopefully entirely. Any opportunity that I have to share that kind of content with you guys, I definitely want to do, because I think it's important. Moving forward, he talks about his disabilities in different ways, sometimes frustration, sometimes a more patient mind, I would say, with himself. And ultimately he ends or he always comes back around to like this idea of gratefulness and like being grateful for his body and for his abilities and even for his limitations and what they teach him. He's just really grateful to be here, which I think is, especially this year, apt. It really is a big deal to be here and to be alive and to be able to be a part of the world with everyone else, even as we isolate or lock down in some places or are not able to see our families for the holidays. It's still a big deal to be here, as hard as it is. And that was such an important reminder for me, because it's been very hard to find things to be grateful for. I guess being isolated or being kind of locked up in the house all of the time, you kind of feel like you're losing your sense of like place in the world, like this is it. And it's been hard to sometimes find things to be happy about, but there are so many things to be happy about. And I did read this around Thanksgiving, so also I guess a really great way of putting that holiday in perspective. So I'm gonna talk more now about my favorite poems from him, the first of which is called My Favorite Sweater. And this is about moths, which was not expecting. And for me personally, I don't like bugs, like point blank. And I don't like them specifically when they're in the house. And so this was a different turn on when nature finds its way in your house. You don't like burn the house down. His take is that you welcome it and like thank the moths. And I was like, interesting. Not my method, but go off. Basically, the poem is about when the moths come every year to feast on his favorite sweater. He thanks them and hopes that they have a good meal, and is grateful when they leave enough behind of his favorite sweater to wear. And I was like, wow, that's really sweet. Because I would not be so benevolent, if that's the word. I think his theme, or one of his themes, is finding a way to, I guess, go back to enjoying and accepting and I guess making room for the world that we live in. And I think he makes this point, especially for those of us who live in cities, we are really trying to like block nature out. Like we lock our houses, we rip down nature in order to put our stamp, our real estate, our sign that we were here. We rip all of nature down just to prove that. And I think he's trying to get us to reevaluate that and maybe get back to loving nature again. And, you know, I'm not a huge nature person, but even I appreciate that and see the value in that. Yeah, we need to be a lot kinder to our earth because this is where we're gonna be and we need to take care of it. And not just take care of it, but also like enjoy taking care of it. I think he doesn't want the idea of like being here on earth to and like taking care of nature or appreciating nature to be sort of like this chore or struggle or thing that you have to do. It's more like, no, we should embrace it and do better. My next favorite poem is called My Favorite Time of Day is Whenever Light Begins to Dim. And this is where he talks about his eyes. And I think if I remember correctly, he refers to his eyes as two suns on the sides of his nose, which right off the bat got my attention because I've never heard anyone describe eyes in that way. And I was just like, oh, tell me more about the suns on the sides of your nose. It really just starts with this idea of truth and reality. And he has this massively good line that talks about how his desires color his perception of reality. And that blew my mind because that's so true. Where's the lie? Everything that you desire in life colors how you perceive the world and how you perceive your reality. And it doesn't always align with what is actually real or what is actually true. And I know we could get into philosophy. I'm not going to do that. But for the sake of this poem, like, yeah, it's just sometimes those things are different. And sometimes you get shown that in like a really, really hard way. It was just such an interesting poem, how he decided to weave in like how physical sight and these abstract concepts of like truth and reality, things that people argue about all the time, and then you have something as concrete as sight, like what your eyes can see, and how he weaves those two things or three things together was just kind of mind-blowing, actually. He also talks about truth and he expands on that and how, I guess, when reality sort of comes knocking at times or when it doesn't align with what he's perceived to be reality, the truth can be hard to swallow, and it is hard to swallow. And I guess all of the talk about truth was also kind of hard-hitting for this year because truth has been something that has been elusive, to say the least, or for lack of a better phrase. I guess it made me self-reflect on my own, I guess, perceptions and whether or not they're true. And if they're not, like, how do you just wait for life to be like, here's the truth in your face, or do you seek it? And I think Ricky is saying that you seek it, because there's a line at the very end of his poem where he says, you either use the truth or you die. And I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, because even if, say, you don't physically die, I think ignorance in and of itself, or I guess not having or seeking truth in and of itself, maybe that would be better, is a death in and of itself. Because if you're living in a delusion or a world that isn't real in your head, are you living, or are you trying to always bend it into like what you see? Is it tunnel vision? Yeah. This is just like my thought process on like how I process poetry, and sometimes I ramble, and I'm also not sorry for that. But as heavy as his poetry can be, he does have an element of humor. In this poem specifically, he goes to his ophthalmologist, and his ophthalmologist tells him that his light is dimming before it's time, as in his eyes are not working properly. And he responds in like this indignant manner that I found funny. I don't know if you will, but I found it to be humorous, where he kind of responds in this way of like, well, I think the ophthalmologist has dimmed before his time. And I was just like, ooh, shade, we love it. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there, that it's not all heavy. He definitely does have some humor in there for those of you who like a little bit of both. The last thing that I want to talk about is his ability to paint pictures with his words. Let me explain. So I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience where like you're reading a book and you're seeing the words, like you're registering the words, but the words are not like actually showing up in your mind. It is showing up as like a developing picture or like movie or like scenario in your head that you can see. That happens like a lot with, you know, prose because it's more descriptive in a concrete way. You have people to focus on and places, and you're having to move and look around or, you know, focus on something. And that happens a lot, at least for me, with prose. Not so much with poetry, unless like narrative poetry, like Ilya Kaminsky's book. There was a poem, and I'm not going to spoil which one or what it's about, because I think for that poem it's more important that you read it not knowing, because I think spoiling it will actually ruin the poem. So I'm not going to mention which one it is. But there is a poem in this book that I had that experience with and loved every minute of it. And it was very much a panoramic where I don't know if a panoramic, or it's more like it's a moving poem, but not in like a fast-paced way. It's like he focuses on something small, and as he is describing the thing and the thing around it, he's getting a larger picture. And in my head, I'm like zooming out, if that makes sense. And as he's getting into this larger picture, he's also now bringing in concepts and elements and lessons about life itself and how he feels about it, and just generally blowing my mind. And then once he like reaches, I guess, his main point, he starts bringing it back in and like getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we're back at the thing that he started with. And then that object now has so much more significance, because now you as the reader have associated it with this much larger concept. And I don't know, I love that like so much. I love it when poets blow my mind. It makes me so happy and motivated, thank God, to read more. And so yes, Ricky did that, and I appreciate it so much. It is a crying shame that I haven't heard about this guy before, but I have remedied that, or I guess that problem has remedied itself by the publisher reaching out to me, who I also want to just briefly mention, Fly on the Wall Press. I will leave information about them in the description for those of you who want to look into all of the work that they're publishing and that they have to offer. They're based in the UK, I think. They do some really great work, so I'm going to leave their information below, as well as more information and links to Ricky's books, because I don't know about you, but I want to get on that train and keep going because he's amazing. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. A word of encouragement for all of us living in 2020, just all of us in general, because it's been rough literally everywhere. It is vital that we do our best to remember the really important things in life: family, friends, your pets, being kind to others, being compassionate, having empathy, being aware of those bigger, more important things, and being grateful for the things that you have. It can be very grounding, I guess, to focus more on those things than on the negativity, if at all possible. Try to find things in life to look forward to, even if it's just going to get boba or getting back in bed. What a victory. I love my bed so much, and any time that I get to be in it makes me look forward or makes me motivated to finish my work so I can get back in my bed and like watch The Office or whatever. But yes, don't forget to follow me on Instagram if you want to read more of my personal work. I also do like little mini reviews on there for people who want me to read their poetry. I will give you a written review. I hope you guys have a great day, week, month, rest of the year. Yeah, I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye.